Hey, good evening. We invited a few doctors to this first webinar that we're trying to do in our office, just to, first of all, see if we could pull it off, and secondly, to get your feedback on how it went. My vision, I guess, is to do as much education as we can through webinars, so the doctors that use our system and whatnot won't have to spend a lot of time traveling and whatnot. I know you missed my pretty face, well, here it is. If you have questions during this presentation, it's going to be a short presentation, probably 30 minutes or so. If you have any questions at all, try and type them in or ask the questions. I think you're muted right now, but you can unmute yourself and ask a question. It's really just an educational overview or look at the new implant system. So we're pretty excited about it. We've been working on it for several years. Finally got FDA approval for some of the products, not just the implants, but a few other products we're just going to mention tonight and potentially do future webinars to show the new products and how they're used both surgically and restoratively. Hey, Zach, my battery's about dead. You want to grab my battery thing out of my pack before this thing shuts itself off? All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. But again, if you have a question, type it in. If not, type it in. Just unmute yourself, and we'll see if we can hear you. So the purpose of this is to introduce the new Series 3, 4, and 5 implants. Only people on this webinar are current customers, a few of you. So what I want to do is just kind of update you on what we've done differently with the new system and why I think it's probably the system that most of you are going to want to go to relatively soon. The Series 1 and Series 2 you've had experience with. We listened to our customers and tried to determine what it is that they wanted so that we could improve system, and I think some of these improvements really came from your recommendations. So Series 1 and 2 is our standard series. We still provide that series, but now we have 3, 4, and 5. There's similarities. It's still a tapered connection. It's still an implant that you can place at crest or below. Any implant system, like I said before, that's blasted up to the top should be placed at least at crest or bone or below. If you plug that in over there, probably is the best spot. I'll flip this side here. So we got prepared, but I just forgot to plug my computer in. Anyhow, it's got a 6-degree taper. The other implant system was a 3-degree per side taper, so it's not quite as tight a connection. And the reason we did that is, as you know, those Series 1 and 2, once they're together, they're pretty difficult to get apart. So we wanted to change the connection, make it an implant that still could be placed subcrestal, but maybe a little easier to connect and disconnect the abutment from the implant. Talked about this already. You can place it at crest or subcrestal. There's 3 new connection platforms, and that's really what Series 3, 4, and 5 refer to. Series 3 is the smallest of the diameters. It goes down to a 3.5 diameter implant, and the Series 4 is that intermediate platform, and Series 5 is the larger platform for your 5.5 and 6.5 diameter implants. So again, we'll get into the details as we go along, but the reason there's more than one connection, there's 3 connections. The bigger the implant, the more load, the bigger the connection, the stronger the implant is the concept. I think some implant companies, personally myself, like Anklos, for example, had a 1 implant series. They like that concept because there's less restorative parts. The downside is there's a lot more breakage when you're putting a big crown on a small implant. So that was why we decided to go a different direction. Probably the thing that was asked for most from our doctors that use our system is they wanted a more aggressively threaded implant. So we now have, we now have 2 more aggressively threaded implants than our first Series 1 and Series 2 implants. And we'll show you examples of that. So more aggressively threaded than our first is the standard thread design, and the very aggressive thread design is also a new component. The surfaces on the implant are blasted differently with a different product, with the idea that they would potentially integrate quicker and attract more blood product to the implant for that quicker integration. So that's the reason for the different surface. It's a tapered connection now. This is one of the bigger benefits that we didn't have with the last implant. Like I said, once those implant and abutment are connected together, it is very difficult to get them apart. Now we have a tool, and I'll show you the tool here in a minute, that actually, if you put the abutment in 3 years later, want to take the abutment out, take the screw out, and with a tool you can remove the abutment from the implant. So it's now a more retrievable tapered connection. It's a simple surgical and restorative kits, and I'll show you the kits. They're much smaller, much less tooling in these kits than in the initial Series 1 and 2 design. All right, so we covered this a bit already. Morse taper connection has stayed. Subcrestal platement has stayed. Standard thread design is much more aggressive than it was before. They're color-coded, as you can see in this diagram here. The smallest diameter Series 3 has a blue color. This, what you're looking at here, is a Series 4. It's a purple connection. So both the abutment connection and the implant itself are colored that color. And then the abutments, as you can see, also are anodized to a gold color so that they're better aesthetically if you're using standard type abutments. So all those features are new with the new implant system. So again, you can see the small diameter blue, middle diameter purple, and the largest diameter is, I call it green. It's not quite green, it's an off green of some color, but you get the idea. So those are your three different series, 3, 4, and 5. Drivers and whatnot to place the implants are similar, and we'll get into that here shortly. All right, so your implant also comes in your standard 8, 10, 12, and 14 millimeter lengths. Your 300 series, you probably can't read this chart. I'm not expecting you to read it, but look at the colors. The 300 series implants are 8, 10, 12, and 14 millimeters long, like all the rest. The diameter is 3.5. The 400 series implants are 4.0 and 4.5 in diameter for those cases, the intermediate range cases, and your wide bone profile cases, 5.0 or 5.5, are that green. I call it green in color. If you look on that lower chart, again, you probably can't read it on your end, but the aggressively threaded implants are this chart listed below, right down in here. These are your standard thread design and your more aggressive thread design. There's also 3, 4, and 500 series in both of these systems. The more aggressively threaded implants go up to a 6.5 in diameter. Again, when you show you the component parts, it'll make a little more sense to you. You don't need to get all the details tonight, just get the concept of what we've produced is the idea. Packaging is very similar. The only difference in the packaging, you have the same type of implant coming in a similar package, a much smaller box than we originally had, but the same type of attachments on top of the implant to place the implant. One change is the cover screw now is actually embedded into this plastic carrier, so the implant, the transfer, and the cover screw are in the same package. The transfer could be used as a temporary abutment if you want it to be. It could be used as an impression post, even though it's not ideal for that. And it could be used as the permanent abutment, even though we're not advertising as such. So potentially this transfer now, if you cut the top off, could be used for a stock standard temporary abutment if you decided to use it as such. So that is also a change from our first two systems, or first two platforms. All color coordinated. All right, so let's, if you don't mind, Tom, let's switch cameras and let's actually look at the implants themselves. All right, so on the table here, basically what you're seeing, are we up, Tom? On the table, basically what we're seeing is this is your standard packaging on the Series 1 and 2. So that is your Series 1 and 2. They're green and gold. Now your Series 3 is blue. And if you look closely at this, you have your standard thread design here and your aggressive thread design here. So again, when would you use one implant over the other? Some of you will probably say, well, I'm only going to use one, not the other. You probably could get away with it. But the idea of the very aggressive thread design is poor bone quality, poor bone density. You want better primary stability, so you would choose an implant with a more aggressive thread design. Blue transfers, so you can see there is Series 300, Series 400, Series 500. And they go up in size in terms of diameter, all the same length. So again, what I said earlier, if you wanted to place an implant, put a temporary abutment on, you could potentially cut off the purple part and use this for your temporary abutment, or you could save these and use them for a stock abutment for your final restoration. They are designed to do that, again, even though we aren't advertising it that way. So that's basically the implants themselves, but both of these implants that you see are more aggressively threaded than your standard implants were from Series 1 and 2. Also, you'll see on this implant that I'm showing here. Up towards the top of the implant, there's micro threads. The micro threads is also a new feature. The micro thread design is, I don't know if there's a lot of merit to it, but what it's designed to do is put less pressure on the cortical bone when you place the implant. There you go, that looks like a little better. It's blurred out a little bit, but there actually are micro threads up towards the top of the implant and more aggressive threads as you move down. Set it down. I'm chasing it. Okay. Micro threads up here, more aggressive threads down here. You'll find when you use these implants, they drive in easier than our current system. That's probably surprised me more than anything else. We have more aggressive threads. I thought they'd drive in harder. They actually drive into the implant system somewhat easier than our original implant design. All right, so that's basically the implants themselves. You have quite a variety of lengths and sizes as you can imagine. Obviously, you're going to use lots of 8s and 10s and potentially 12s, probably use 14s very, very seldom. All right, that makes sense? We'll move on. Again, if you have any questions, be sure and let me know. We'll be back on the PowerPoint again. Okay, so the surgical kits are way different. This is what you're looking at here is the surgical kit for the implant, one implant. It's much smaller, much less tools. And again, they're in the manual that we can email you or whatnot. If you're interested in these systems, we'll email you the manual, and all this is explained quite well in the manual. But there are a lot less tools, easier for sterilization, easier for the surgical field. There's actually a surgical kit and a drill kit. We're going to show you those kits here now on the other camera. So if you want to go to that, Tom, that would be awesome. Just give us a minute to adjust the magnification. Okay, we'll just start with the drill kit. I'll show you how to use these on a model in just a minute. I'm not going to kill you with the details, but these are the two kits that potentially you need to place any implant that we have. Obviously, this is your ratchet. This is your ratchet adapter to drive an implant in. This is another attachment that you can drive the implant in with. And these are the different drivers for the 3 different diameter platforms that we have. So if you pull this out, you can see that it has I think you can, a blue slot on the side of it. So this is your 300 series drivers. This would go into your ratchet and drive the implant in. So obviously that's the ratchet adapter. Just like the other system, it has a handpiece adapter. So if you want to drive the implant in with your motor-driven handpiece, that's the 300 series. Got the same thing here for the 400 series. And if you look at the color, if I can turn it around here, there's a purple color on there so you know which one it goes in. So that would drive in your 400 series implants. 300, 400, ratchet adapter, handpiece adapter, and you got the same thing here for the 500 series implant. So all those tools are just used to drive the implant in. These are just 2 parallel pins, and you're all very familiar with what that is, if you can see it. And your implant parallel pins are here. This is to remove the screw inside the implant abutment connection, so that's your hex tool. It can be used by hand or with a ratchet adapter, and that's your hex tool that puts on the implant, puts on the abutment, puts on the healing cap, takes off the healing cap, torques down the abutment. Those are the only 2 tools you need to do those 2 things. This is a round burr here in the end to get started with your osteotomy. I personally don't use this anymore. I use what we call a lance drill, and I'll show you what that is here in a second as well. I find it much more useful than the round drill. And then this is your attachment, if I can get it out. This is your attachment that you use if you want to start the placement of the implant by hand rather than with a handpiece or a ratchet. So the surgical kit is really a lot simpler than what we had before, a lot less component parts, easier to sterilize, easier to maintain. So that's the surgical kit. And then the drill kit, the corresponding drill kit you need to place every implant is obviously here as well. So these 2 kits you need to place any implant in the system. If you can read this, is it? Yeah, that's much easier. Was the other one upside down too?
No, it's fine.
Okay. See, I'm easily challenged. All right. Your drill extender's in the middle. Obviously, you know what that's for. You have the pilot drill that you'd start an osteotomy. And then you move to the next step. If you look over here on this right here, look below it, it says standard 3.5. So if you're putting in a 3.5 implant, the smallest implant, or 3.25 series 100 from the old series, this is the last drill you'd use. It's also the last drill you would use for the wide diameter 4.5 or 4.1. So it places those 4 diameter implants, this one drill. So if you're doing sequential drilling, pilot drill, final drill for those 4 diameter implants. So the standard 3.5 and 3.25, and the wide 4.5 and 4.1. Now I'm sure that confuses the heck out of you. Why would you have one drill of that many different diameters? The wide thread implants have the series 3 connection, but the thread design is actually quite a bit wider than the implant. So the threads are wider, but the body of the implant's the standard, the 3 series implant. So don't be confused by the numbers here. If you're putting any one of those implants in, stop with that drill. If you're going to the standard drill, or the standard 4.0 implant, which there is no wide thread implant for 4.0, this is your final drill. Now if you're going to your wide 5.5 or standard 4.5, this is your final drill. And if you're going to your standard 5.0 implant, there's your final drill. And if you're going to the 5.5 implant or 6.5 wide thread implant, here's your final drill. So there's really only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different drills, and most of the time you're going to focus down here and hardly ever use these. Would be my guess, the bigger diameter drills. So much less drills. The drills are actually different than the design we had before. We actually have 2 different types of drills now. What I like better about these drills is the laser lines, and how well you can see them, are much thicker than before. So the bottom of that first laser line is 6 millimeters, the top is 8, and the second laser line is 10 and 12. So much easier to see these drills clinically. They're more aggressively threaded, or not threaded, aggressively fluted drills, so they cut faster, more aggressively probably than the drills we had. Now we have other drills in design that have stops on them and things like that, but we'll cover that under another webinar potentially. So those are the surgical kits that you would use to place any implant that we now provide with the 3, 4, and 5. Actually, the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 diameters. These 2 surgical kits could place any one of the 5 series implants that we sell. Okay, so that is that. And then if we're placing the implants, you want to go, actually stay on that screen. I'll actually demonstrate how these kits work here before we get too far along. All right, so we'll just take a minute to show you how the implants potentially would be placed in a model. So let me grab a model here and get it in focus here somehow. So let's say we were going to place a 3.5 implant. That would be your, find the right here. That would be your blue implant, and your Series 4 implant would be your purple implant. So if you can imagine we were going to place that 3.5 implant, we would do what? We would potentially make it, if we're freehanding this implant, I said I don't use a round drill anymore. This is what we call a lance drill. It's just a spear. It's a very pointed drill. I find it much more useful than a round drill to start an osteotomy. So if we were going to do an osteotomy with this lance drill, it's very sharp, very pointed. You just hit the button, and this is set at 6 millimeters, so you can go down 6 millimeters, and there's your initial osteotomy with a lance drill. So I would use that first. Then potentially you could go to your pilot drill, take your pilot drill to length. I think what I have here is a 10 millimeter drill, so that's your 10. And your first one, the blue one, is a 3.5 diameter implant. So flip it around. A 3.5 diameter implant, so this would be potentially your final drill. All right, so we're going to take the final drill, Drill to your distance. And I'm drilling to about 12 millimeters. You'll take my word for it. And I'm going to put in a 10 millimeter length implant. So that's the end of your osteotomy. And now you have choices to put the implant in. I potentially, most of the time, always start with a motor-driven handpiece. If you like a ratchet, that's obviously an option as well. So we're going to load it. Make sure you're running at the proper rotation and torque. Place the implant. One of the things that we've run into over the last few years is, regardless of what implant system you're using, if you set your torque on the motor at a certain torque, maybe 50 Newton centimeters, if that torques out, which it just did here, if it torques out at 50 Newton centimeters, that's about as much torque as you want to put on anybody's transfer on the implant. So if it torques out at 50 Newton centimeters, you should take the transfer off, because if you keep driving it in, here is now the hex tool that we talked about. Take the transfer off. And it's got a jack out feature that the abutment or the transfer should come right off. And then use your drivers, since it's Series 300, use your drivers then to drive the implant in the rest of the way. If you drive it in with that transfer, like I said, you could distort the transfer and have trouble getting it off the implant. Ask me how I know. Okay, so we're just driving this thing in. I don't know if I'm in focus or not, but you guys all get the idea. And it's as simple as that. So the tooling has changed, but it hasn't changed dramatically. It's the same kind of a concept that you had before. So there's your implant placed, and that's how the tooling would work. Now, if you're using an aggressively threaded implant, which we have right here, nothing changes. You still use the same concept. We have the lance drill. And the thing that you'll notice, the aggressively threaded implants actually thread in to the osteotomy almost as easy as the ones that are standard. So I'm going to skip the pilot drill, just go to final drill. So that's final drill. And now again, the same concept. Grab your aggressively threaded implant. Attach it to your driver, whichever driver you like, and rotate the implant in place. So again, this one's torquing out too. You got a ways to go yet, so I won't drive it in the rest of the way. You get the idea. So that is basically how the system works. It's not dramatically different than the other systems that we had. What I've done differently than when I talked to a lot of you is I got rid of the round burr. I use the lance drill. We have those, and you can have those available in your surgical kit potentially. All right, so that's basically the tooling of the surgical kit and the drill kit. And again, those are the tools that you need. There are taps in this system now. There's a separate kit of taps that I have, but I've never used yet, maybe never will. So that's one of another kit that looks just like this with a tap for each diameter and those hard bone profile setups. All right, while we're talking about drills, no, actually I'll go to that later. All right, you want to go back to the PowerPoint again? If you would. All right, so looking at the PowerPoint, these are the drivers that we just went over in the surgical kit. So again, in the manual, they're pretty self-explanatory, very close to what we had before, so should be pretty straightforward. Drill kit, drills, different diameter drills, and again, in the manual, it'll show you the drills that you would potentially use for each implant placement. Restorative kit, there's a restorative kit that looks like these two kits. It has all the tools that you need to restore your case, another very small kit. In this, again, you could restore any of the 5 diameter implants or 5 series implants that we have and all the tooling that you need. The torque on the Series 1, 2, and 3, the two current series, plus this new Series 3, is still 20 Newton centimeters. The abutment screw is smaller than the screw on the Series 4 and 5. So those are set now at a higher torque value. The torque on the first three series, 1, 2, and 3, is 20 Newton centimeters. It says it on the manual, or it says it on the kit here. And the torque on the 4 and 5 series is 30 Newtons. And those are breakaway torque wrenches, so you've got a torque wrench for each one of them that only does those two things, sets them at 20 or 30. And those seem to be the easiest torque wrenches to maintain and keep working properly with the proper torque. So those are your, that's the restorative kit that you're looking at there. There's a bone profiler kit for all 5 series, just like we had before. Only thing different is you have, compared to the kit you have now, if you have one, there's only 2 more pins that need to go in that kit. So there's now 5 pins for 5 different diameters rather than 2. The abutment removal tool is what we talked about before. I think this is a big plus with this new system. So Series 3, 4, and 5, you should now potentially never have an abutment on an implant, even though the connection is tight and it's strong, that you can't get back off. And I think it's the first tapered implant system that I know of that has a removal tool. So that took some engineering, and I think that will work out well for your clinical cases. Standard abutments, all anodized now, gold on the part that goes through the tissue, so they're more aesthetic. Color coded at the connection, so once you take off the healing cap, if you're document as well as I do and you didn't document the diameter of the implant you put in, you can simply look in the implant. If it's blue, purple, or green, you know which abutment platform you need to put in that implant system. All right, you got your tie base abutments, and again, I'm not going to kill you with the details here. You got your tie base abutments and your conical abutments for all your zirconia, CAD/CAM systems that you might want to use to restore these cases. Ball attachments, just like Series 1 and 2, are available, and also the locator type attachments. We call them denture retaining abutments, but they're basically locators. And then you have, with these systems now, you have a titanium blank that can be used to make a patient-specific abutment that would look something like this case that just happened to be working on this week. So there's your patient-specific abutment, and your digital analogs and whatnot go along with it, so that you could make a patient-specific titanium restoration. So all the things that you would need digitally is available. All right, so that's just a summary of the 3 implant systems. We have some future products and webinars that I intend to do. Again, my goal is to make this as easy as I can without having people to travel to keep up with whatever innovations that are out there. The surgical guides, I'll show you just a couple slides on that. We have developed some new single-use patient drills. The idea behind the single-use patient drills is sterilization and whatnot. You use the drill on one patient and throw it away. So potentially, if you were doing guided surgery, you could not use any of the drills that I showed you. You could use, if you're doing guided surgery, one drill, place the implant, throw the drill away, and have a single patient drill protocol. Again, we'll talk about that in more detail. These drills are designed differently. They're actually made in Germany. It's pretty exciting. They don't generate any heat, or very little heat. Any drilling generates some heat. Very little heat. We're finding when we're studying these cases that instead of a 4 to 6 month integration, because we're not heating up the bone, a lot of these cases now we're going to restore at 6 weeks rather than 6 months. So that requires a different drill than what's standard on the market today, and those drills are also going to be available very shortly, and they're going to look something like that. You probably can't see it very well, but they're very aggressive drills. I call them a weapon. They drill totally differently than the drills that I'm used to. If you were doing non-guided surgery, you could potentially use that lance drill to make your purchase. One drill to final length and place the implant. So that potentially would be something I think that's interesting and exciting. But this is actually, it looks similar to our drill, but it's a step drill, and the flutes and everything on there are just designed differently. So we're going to talk about that. In terms of implant stability, there's a radio frequency that's been out for a while. We have that now available for our implant systems, and it's called a Penguin. So again, because we're trying to restore implants now at 6 weeks rather than 6 months, we're testing them to see how stable and integrated they are before we restore them. The Penguin would look something like, this is what it looks like. Hold on.
Okay, now we see it.
So this is the instrument, that's the Penguin, that's what it looks like. So again, it's a radio frequency, and how this thing works, if you had an implant, let's assume this was in somebody's head. If you had an implant, you just, with this tool, you screw in the abutment, or the post, I'll call it, not the abutment. And it's a radio frequency. So if you turn the thing on, it'll give you a certain number. And then when you put this next to the implant, it will also give you a number of So this number says, I can't read, if you can read it, it says 45. So in this mandible, it's 45 number is stable. That's how stable the thing is. But that technology has been out there for a while. My protocol is if it's above 70, restore the case. If it's below 70, wait a bit longer. So at least there's some documented way of now determining whether your implant's integrated well. Basically, it measures stability. It really doesn't measure integration. If you put an implant in today, it could measure 80. It's not integrated, it's stable. Implants, after they've been placed, will lose some stability as the bone remodels. So if at week 2, it might, if it started out at 80, it might read 40. And then at week 3, 4, and 5, that integration number will start to go up. You know you're getting integration of the implant. So my number is at around 70, I'll restore. So it's just another tool that we're using. We plan to do some surgical and restorative webinars rather than having people come here. And what I mean by that, we'll pick every procedure that I do and we'll videotape it, and then we'll come up and show it on a webinar and walk people through how we're doing different surgical procedures. So again, I think we're going to work on that. Restorative webinars the same. Digital implant dentistry, diagnostic, surgical, and restorative webinars. We're planning to do all of those in the next year to help us introduce our customers to the systems that we have. And obviously, any suggestions that you guys have for webinars, we'd be happy to listen to and see if we can come up with that. We talked to you about these Lucid smart drills. These drills eventually, probably within the next few months, are going to have heat indicators on them that the industry hasn't seen yet. But the heat indicator will actually light up, change color when you get to a temperature that isn't safe for bone. So again, we're trying to get that integration process down to a very short time frame, 6 weeks instead of 6 months. So those two things are coming, and we'll do more in a better explanation of those two things as we go along. We're building a new facility in implant logistics, so people ask you, are going to be around? I hope so. We're going to be around. We're building a new manufacturing facility and a distribution facility, and we make implants for ourselves and other companies as well. So we're pretty excited about this as well. So that's our new facility that's being built right now in the snow. The snow's pretty much gone now, but that's where we're at. All right. I said a half an hour, and it's 40 minutes, so I'm over time. Any questions come in, Tom? No questions so far? Okay. Does our questions work?
Hopefully.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you. I would appreciate your feedback. We invited, like I said, just a few doctors. For you doctors that are listening, I'd appreciate any feedback you have. You can call me or email me or text me or whatnot. Let me know what worked and what didn't work, and we'll connect again in the future, I think, to update you on what we're working on. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.